devices as drugs. Though I had heard about this, it made no sense to me at that time. And to actually tell you the truth, even now it doesn't make much of sense to me. But the biggest advantage of being the moderator is that I sit in the chair looking very, very brilliant, knowledgeable, while I get everybody else to give their, put in their input. So it makes my life much more simpler. Today's topic is a very, very relevant one, and I must congratulate the team over here for having selected this, because this is coming in very strongly. And in April 1st, 2020, we are expected to be fully compliant with it. The good and the bad of this has still not been discussed. The good and bad of this has still not been understood, and it's a long way to go, but the end point has been, and the timeline has been already targeted. So with these words, I'd just like to welcome my co-participants. I won't spend much time introducing them because they have already been introduced and are very eminent people in their own fields. The first person who's going to talk will be talking on what is this concept, drug devices as drugs. And I'll have Dr. C.S. Satish Kumar doing that for us. So please. I welcome all the delegates. Each of them will be given 7 minutes to talk about their topic. Very comfortable from either their sitting places or they can use the podium. And we will have the summary at the end with a few questions taken from the audience.
India quinine fraud in 1927. You know what is that fraud in quinine? During that period, late 1920s, around 110 million Indians were down with malaria, and the drug of choice was quinine at that time. And 10% of the people died. Around 11 million people died during that period. So there was a commission after that, Colonel Chopra Commission. He identified that 3% of the quinine supplied to the patients were spurious, and 22% of the quinine was having less than 60% of content. Again 20%, again less than 70%. So that was the one reason why there was the calamity. So thereafter there was a hue and cry for the testing laboratory for drugs in India, and in 1940 we have the DNC Act. Act has come in India where import, then manufacturing, quality, sales, etc. was controlled. Thereafter in 64, due to the report of toxicity with the cosmetics, 64 we brought cosmetics into the regulation. That the import and quality of cosmetics was controlled. Then in 80s, we have seen a lot of cases of syringes and needles came into recycling of syringes and all you have heard. 89, we brought syringes under drug. Then in 2006-7, there was kumkum was reported as a lot of toxicity. So kumkum was brought under cosmetic. So from 1118 last year, we brought medical device rules. It's a new rule. So before that, in India, all the devices were notified as drugs only, and all the rules mainly for drugs were applicable to drugs. Then why this regulation? The regulation is for patient safety, patient efficacy, that standards definition, then adverse events reporting, then shelf life, a lot of things. It is for those patient care and patient safety. New medical device rules. We have a risk-based classification. As per the global standards in USA, class 1, 2 and 3. Class 1 is the minimum risk-based, class 3 is the maximum. Example for class 1, you can say thermometer is a class 1 least risk-based device. While class 2 means X-ray. X-ray machines are class 2 in USA. Class 3, that any heart valve is class 3. So that was the basis in USA. And thereafter, if you look into the European standards, again class A, B, C, D. Risk-based, minimum risk is A, maximum risk is D. That was the, globally that was the scenario. On 118, we have gone with the new device. So what was the condition before that? Actually, we have been notifying certain devices as drugs before that device comes. In 89, we have brought needles and syringes. 202, we brought HIV, HCV, that rapid kits we brought into drugs. Then 205, a lot of things, cardiac stents, then that intraocular lens, IV cannula, bone cements, all brought under drugs. So till that 1118, all the rules exactly the same for drugs was followed. But when we came with the new rules, now it is a risk-based classification. Class A, B, C, D is the classification in India as per the rules. A and B means lower risk. A and B is actually controlled by the state FDA,
and C and D being higher risk is controlled by CDSCO, that FDA of India you can call. And for same thing, import is also different applications, different fees, different stringency, A and B, CCR, and basically that QMS has brought into the rule than GMP. For drugs, GMP we call the practice, good practice of manufacturing was replaced by GMP. Sorry, with QMS, it is 13485 we call ISO. That's brought into the system of quality, and CDSO is directly inspecting for C and D, and for class A and B, for class B and B, there is a notified body like in the tech. They are authorized to inspect the premises and give licenses. Across around 600 all items have been classified by the CDSCO. Unlike other countries, the classification is defined by the manufacturer, and is applying for permission. So either the notified body or the government will decide the classification. But in India, what happens is all the classified things have been defined by CDSCO, and we have around 8 to 10 items in class A. Example, alcohol swab is class A. Umbilical occlusion device is class A. When you come to B, around 260 items are in B. From wound closure device to tracheobronchial catheter, all are in B. And class C, we have around 237 items as classified right now, and class D above 80 items. So if you take the class C and D or ABCD, 150 catheters have been defined in the CDSCO, where some are class B, some are class C, some are class D. For example, gastrointestinal tube is class B, so it's a small risk, while hemodialysis catheter is class C. If you take cardiovascular catheter, it is class D. So same item for different uses, as per the risk, we are actually classifying with risk. Same way, implants, around 75 implants are reported, are classified. After that, example, if it is a hip joint, it is in D normally, and if it is normally in knee joint, is class C. And the screws and that implant screws, when the screws are for general purposes, it is class B. And the same screws, when it is given for the spinal actions, it is class C. So that was the way how the risk is risk-based classification we are doing. And apart from that, there are some other things called blood groupings, whereas umbilical tapes, surgical dressings, then intrauterine devices, all are coming under the devices now. And as per the import of these things, class C and D can be imported. These are the items which have been as drugs defined before the onset of the Act rules. See, this is the class A, B, C, D. I have given some examples. Then again, way forward from January 1st, we have nebulizer, BP apparatus, and digital thermometer are going to be defined as drugs and medical device. And from April 1st, we are going to have many other CT scan, MRI equipment, defibrillators, dialysis machines, all are going to come as again devices. So again, yesterday there was a notification from Government of India that from 1st of December this year, they are going to make all the medical devices, which is implants or software or any IVD, anything used for or accessories used for diagnostic purposes or as a accessory to any of the applications, will be considered as drugs. So in that case, no notification necessary. It is blanket power is given to the government to take it as a device. So that means all the devices, applicability, everything will come under device. So what are the other features of this new MVD rules? One thing is now a single window clearance has been happened from 1118. You can apply online to the government of CDSCO website, and then they will decide if A and B, they will send to the concerned state, and C and D, they will come and inspect and grant the permission. Then risk management and risk analysis clause have been introduced into the rule, and then standards are defined like BIS or ISO, IEC, the International Electromechanical Commission. All the standards have been defined and brought into force. Then first time in the history in the drugs or the field, recall condition. If anything is found not of quality or spurious, anything like that, immediate recall is the mandatory for the manufacturer, distributor, and hospital also. They have to immediately recall and inform the authorities about the recall details. Then QMS has been introduced in the system. Then clinical trial protocols. Normally earlier only drugs was in that category, but now any IVD reagent or any devices, if you want to introduce, you have to go for a clinical trial. There is a protocol should be there. There should be a ethics committee, and you have to apply to the CDSCO for before the trial. Application has to be gone to the CDSCO. They will review it, and they'll have a technical committee meeting. You'll have to present it there. Then only the permission for trial is given. So what happens? Cost is going to be very, very, very high. We have today by 4 o'clock in CDSCO office, our office, we have teams going, that has already gone there for a meeting with this SAI committee. In 2 years, we are planning to have that in a UTI a reagent within 4 hours, you can have the result. A new reagent we are going to introduce. And after 1.5 years, only today only we have a appointment with the CDSCO. So that way time lag will be much more. Then there will be a lot of cost incurred for this any manufacturer. The cost of the new device will be very, very high, because we need multi-center trials. We need at least 3 centers we have to have in the trials. So even a small in vitro diagnostic reagent for a UTI reagent, you are undergoing 3 centers for this trial. So that way cost will be very, very high. So that is one of the basic impact for the industry as well as hospitals for this. Then ISO 13485, that system is already there globally. We are also taking into as a mandatory affair. Then one good thing they have done is that once you apply for license, within 5 months you should get a license. Within 45 days there should be a query will be answered, or within 45 days there will be inspection. Again within 2 months there will be license. But normally ultimately what happens, what I heard is that a lot of applications are pending with the CDSCO. So last day they will have a query. Again 45 days. Again a query. So that way the actual time lag is above 5 months always. Then again that import, for import there is another clause has come. Shelf life is now controlled. If it is less than 1 year, this much of shelf life should be there. But when you import like that, there are so many parameters have come. So ultimately, with this, the safety part of the devices are very, very stringent now. Is good, but cost-wise and other for importing also, you have a lot of difficulty. If you want to import, previously import license was only very few. I mean, only 1,000 rupees. Now it is for one class C or D. If you want to import, you have to have $5,000. You have to first you have to remit. Like cost-wise, import is going to be very, very costly. Plus, any import you have only one person for one manufacturer. Again, those things have been more stringent. And our officers from the CDSCO may go to the site of the manufacturer if they can go, for which you'll have to bear the expenditure. So like that. However, it is always good for quality-wise. It's good. And one important thing is that now notified bodies are coming to the manufacturing premises for auditing, because I think in that way corruption can be much less for that part of it. Otherwise, even though all these rules are there, but still when you see that there is no effect. So that way, so I have just gone through the silent features of all the rules. However, from December, every device will be under control as per the new notification. Thank you. Thanks so much.
The next person who is coming on will be, what is the intention behind this? What is the government plan? And our own Mr. Sajeev Matthew will be dealing with that.
As with any new regulations, the intent is good. So we'll see by the time to come whether how is it going to be implemented and how is the outcome going to be. The objective of the new MDR, that is MDR of 2017, treating the devices under drugs, because we have only one act of parliament to control devices and drugs, that is the 1940 Act of Parliament, which is for the Drugs and Cosmetic Act. Under the same Act of Parliament, so there is a rule of Drugs and Cosmetic Rule, which is 1945, dated 1945. So earlier in 2005, government tried to regulate some of the devices, but realized that the drugs and devices are too different by nature. So brought in this new rule, that is MDR 2017. The objectives it's, as sir already mentioned, it is to ensure safety for the patients, who is going to be the ultimate beneficiary. The government introducing it with a good intent, that is for safety of the patients who are going to use these devices. And also the performance as stated by the manufacturers to ensure that it performs as stated. Then to ensure quality, so as per ISO 13485, there is a quality standard which is globally recognized. Quality standard will be brought into India. And as already mentioned, it is the classification of medical devices. So as of now, we have 4 classifications: Class A, Class B, Class C, and D. There is a risk based. So what is the kind of risk these devices poses to the patient? It is based on, some of these are tightly regulated, some are it's a self-compliance kind of regulation going to become. And through this regulation, we are harmonizing with some of the international best practices. There is a global harmonized task force to internationally for all the medical devices, what are the best practices. If it is internationally accredited, one country which is successfully running this kind of a program is Singapore. Though it is a small country, they have a program, this kind of a program. They have a repository. All medical devices which are being imported or manufactured or certified in Singapore, can only be used within Singapore. So that gives 2 things: one, in terms of safety; other one is it is developing a national innovations. That is in terms of promoting. The government has both the roles. One role is to ensure safety for its citizens. The other role is to promote the industry. Now we have a big market for medical devices. The government is trying to promote that manufacturing of medical devices within India. You would have read about MRI machines being manufactured by Tata, that is also in this stage. So we need to create an ecosystem which is required to clinical trials on these indigenously manufactured devices, and then to safe sale of it is marketing, then the other in terms of servicing it, all other things which are required. So government intention is to promote the industry, to have the safety there, and also it is wanted to nurture a culture of self-compliance by the industry itself. And also the government now, with the new rule, the regulatory body is CDSCO. So that is the Central Drugs Standard Control Organization will be doing that one. There are a lot of debate going in the industry whether CDSCO will be able to, because their expertise in drugs, which is chemical in nature. These devices are predominantly electronic in nature, whether they have the expertise within government. But the government is trying to bring in third-party notified bodies and also labs going to be tested under the MDR rule to ensure that that is also taken care. And devices which are being manufactured in India at the manufacturing, and both at the places where it is used and where the manufacturing factories, there also it will be audited for its quality. To summarize it, from a market perspective, before and after picture I am just going to quickly give. So we are now moving from Norway to, we have a streamlined regulatory standards now there. And in the past we have only predominantly devices being imported from Australia, Canada, European Union and America. Now we are promoting that within our country. The regulatory framework, as I already mentioned it, so we have a separate regulatory framework under MDR 2017, and it's a robust framework. It is a risk-based framework, and the entire process is going to be an online, and it's much more transparent, and there is a defined approval procedure also in place. And from a quality standard, it follows the quality standard, and there are third-party assessment organization to ensure quality there. Then rather than the import dependency, we will be some of these import dependencies will be addressed through indigenously manufacturing this, and the fee structure also is made more conducive by the government to ensure that you pay fee, but the licenses given for these equipments will be for lifelong. Pay fee once in 5 years. And from a manufacturing, distribution, sales or import and export perspective, that is also well taken care. From not well defined processes to a well defined process we have, and the quality rules are defined, and it is going to be regulated under the CDSCO, that is the Central Drugs Standard Control Organization. And there is a periodic, from the periodic renewal, it is a long license, but fee need to be paid in 5 years. So this is the government's intent. So government's intent is to create the safe, to provide or facilitate availability of safe devices within the country for that is in alignment with our the universal health coverage practices to make affordable, accessible medical devices which are indigenously developed, make it available to the citizens of India with the safety, international safety standards, and also to promote Make in India move. So with that, let me conclude my presentation here.
I'd like to just take a moment to introduce one person who has not been introduced so far, Advocate Shyam Padman. He will be talking about the industry perspective, the legal aspects. Can devices be considered as drugs?
Moderator Dr. Abraham Mammon, eminent panelites, enlightened audience of this afternoon. I come from the other side of midnight because I'm not a technical person, I'm not a medical person, I come from the legal field. So I would like to approach the entire issue on a different perspective altogether. The premise on which I'll be placing my submissions would be that I assume that the demography of today's audience would be doctors, hospitals, and not manufacturers, sellers, suppliers, distributors, clinical investigators, etc. So on that premise, let me just put it across to you. It is a proven fact, or it has been given wide publicity on account of malfunctioning or defective or deficiencies in this sort of medical devices. There has been catastrophic implications which has resulted in long-lasting legal cases and things like that. Then unnecessary exposure to avoidable risk is one another factor that has been stated. Now, product liability versus professional liability. That is one aspect which assumes importance in the threshold of the discussions that's being done today. Medical device, I'm sure that you will be going through the definitions, etc. I just want you to know that medical devices can be taken as movable goods in the legal parlance. What will be the definition given in the MDR? So, first let me address in the hospital perspective. Hospital perspective of acquiring a medical device would be, it amounts to purchase of goods or a product. So, primarily if there is any issues regarding that product or medical device, it revolves around defect in goods, or if the annual maintenance or maintenance regarding or any servicing defective or deficient it can be said to be deficient service. So it comes under two pigeonhole categories. One is defective goods or deficiency in service. So earlier, what was the scenario? If it was the goods, any defect or deficiency, the general law of torts wherein you can seek damages, or you can ask for specific performance of the contract of supply of the material which you have ordered for, or any difference in the parameters, you can definitely have it corrected. So goods is covered and governed under Sale of Goods Act, wherein section 27 defines it as every kind of movable property. Now, if you can claim yourself to be a consumer, coming under the definition of the Consumer Protection Act, beholds the commercial aspect, etc., because commercial and resale is excluded from Consumer Protection Act. If that be so, section 21I of the Consumer Protection Act defines goods, means goods as defined in the Sale of Goods Act. So you go back to the Sale of Goods Act. Now, regarding the new rules, there are a lot of regulations. I would say to a certain extent it's old wine in new bottle, because implied warranty was there already in the law as per section 16 of the Sale of Goods Act. Now it has been given a statutory recognition and a structured manner in the new rules, so that anybody who indulges in purchase, sale, manufacture has to subscribe to the strict legal mandates. This is just section 16, wherein merchantable quality, etc., sell a particular purpose for which the goods are required, so as to show that the buyer relies on the seller's skill or judgment, and the goods are of description which it is in the course of seller's business to supply. There is an implied condition that the goods shall be reasonably fit for such purpose, provided that in the case, etc. Then merchantability. If a product is placed in the market by a manufacturer or a supplier saying that it's good for something, it ought to. No specific guarantee or warranty need be given. It's an implied warranty. Now, after the MDR, what is the current scenario? You are assured of the standard, quality and performance. All details and parameters, including clinical evidence of its standard effectiveness, has to be declared. You are aware of that. It ensures patient safety, quality and performance parameters of devices. Then only one conundrum will be there. That is,
usage of medical devices not manufactured offered for sale as mandated under MDR. If you go for a product or a device which does not subscribe to the mandate, are you not also equally culpable, negligent if anything goes wrong? For one thing, you are not supposed to acquire anything because it is under law, it is to be under a certain parameter. We shall address it shortly. Now, 3 rules I found from the entire rule structure which may affect this audience today is Rule 42, import of investigational medicinal device by government, hospital or statutory medical institution for treatment of patient. Rule 43, import of medical device for personal use. And 63, permission to import or manufacture medical device which does not have its predicative device. That is, there is no parameter for that. Now, let us see the patient perspective. MDR or otherwise, as far as the consumer or the patient or the beneficiary of the services is concerned, it is nothing but a deficiency in service because he does not come to purchase any good or product from your establishment. Because once you view it in the patient's perspective, it ceases to be a product or a good. It is not a device anymore. It is part and parcel of the treatment protocol that you are offering. Anything goes wrong, either it is product centric or your service centric, whatever it is. End of the day, as far as the patient is concerned, it doesn't make any difference. The regular law of the law dealing with medical malpractices, negligence, whether it is before the Permanent Law Adalat, whether it is before the Consumer Protection Act, whatever it is, it applies. The patient is thoroughly unaware of what the product you are using, what kind of, if he is asked for take an X-ray or something, he just goes and exposes himself to the radiation. He is not concerned with product, which company, what are the parameters, nothing. It is for the hospital, the institution, the concerned doctor to make sure that whatever is being offered is of standard quality. And if that be done, and if something untoward happens, maybe to that extent, it is just like having clinical guidelines. So a case of deficiency of service, negligence rather than one of defect in goods will be multed against the establishment. Now let us see, MDR is a boon or a bane. I would always say, or I am a votary or I am a supporter of the new rules, and I would say that it has to be more explored, more expanded and made more articulate. The standard with which Indian or any civilized country deals with malpractice actions is number 1. They don't ask you to cure, it's only reasonable care, caution and attention. Number 1. Number 2, ordinary skill of an ordinary practitioner. If you are a specialist, the degree is more, and in there is a world of difference between elective and emergency procedures. Emergency procedures, you got lot of leeways, and lack of facilities. Ladies and gentlemen, lack of facilities is not a defense under Indian law, and for that matter, any other law for that matter. So it is just like clinical guidelines. Now let us pursue this in the MDR perspective. Care and not cure. Of course, care to see to that you use standard equipment, standard medical devices which subscribes to the standards fixed by the MDR. Number 1. Number 2, reasonable care, caution and attention is a corollary of that. Unless if you are able to show that you are used in the given circumstances what is necessary. Now the definition of negligence in this parameter, if you analyze, is the omission to do something which a reasonable man guided by those considerations which ordinarily regulate human affairs would do, doing something which a prudent and reasonable rational man would not do. Simple. Would you use a defective or a deficient equipment, or would you use something illegal or unauthorized in your day-to-day affairs? A reasonable and prudent man. If you don't, the same thing can be imported to your professional life or in your professional establishment, and that is what exactly is happening. Now, 3 or 4 issues will be complicated by these new rules. One is the consent factor. In the consent, a question may arise, are you not supposed to disclose the machinery or the medical device you are using or not? Number 1. Number 2 is liability, manufacturer or user or the medical device or you. Number 3 is data integrity. Privacy and confidentiality is now assuming a huge role, and if there is any compromise on that, you will be unnecessarily exposed to litigation. Now, on the positive side, we will say that Drugs Technical Advisory Board final stage of drawing up a patient compensation plan for faulty medical devices. That will take a lot of burden out of the hospitals and doctors, because if there is nowadays, even if it's a stent or anything which goes wrong, there is no way that the patient can be compelled to go behind the manufacturer. But if such a protocol is evolved, much burden can be taken away from the establishment and the doctors. And compensation procedure. Now, like the learned speakers earlier said, that everything is now being brought under this thing, the MDR. So I'd sum up my submissions by saying that MDR is definitely a boon, and if you subscribe to it properly, understanding the legal mandates and parameters, What is necessary is universally accepted standard medical protocol. If protocols are established, this would become one of the guidelines with which and by which we could be protected. Thank you.
We have our own Dr. Subin talk about the health perspective. Can devices be considered as drugs? Dr. Subin.
Clinician's perspective. Regulation in the case of high-end medical devices, because I'm a radiologist, I'm giving that perspective, and equipments are a welcome step in the right direction, especially considering that there has been considerable consolidation in the manufacture of such high-end products in medical industry in such context of high-value devices like CT and MR. So the choice for us as end users have become limited to just 3 or 4 main international players in the marketplace. So it would be in our interest that an oversight by a regulatory body under the medical devices regulation is there to ensure that we are getting the products that we deserve and pay for. There has been instances where big manufacturers have been caught supplying second-hand products labeled as new, and although cases have been filed against the local distributor, no major action has been taken against the company at large. Coming to smaller and simpler devices like catheters and drainage tubes, one has to understand the quality of locally made Indian products are much to be desired of. The reliability and usability of such indigenous products can definitely be improved if basic minimum standards are enforced. Now, coming to international price capping and foreign-made prostheses and devices, which cause a significant impact in healthcare costs. When such regulations are made mandatory, and when new players and indigenous players come into the market, probably there will be a significant reduction in costs, and international companies will also positively consider reducing their existing prices. Now, the conundrum as a clinician's perspective is, where do these manufacturers go to for their licensing? I have called up at least three salespeople from one of the major manufacturers of imaging technology items, and none of them have any clue on the medical device regulations. Absolutely no clue. They have not even gone back to me on such information. So these multiplicity of regulatory bodies, would they cause a hurdle for us clinicians getting high-end imaging technology or diagnostic tools, giving them to the consumer, that is our patients, by these regulatory bodies creating an inordinate delay? And do the government and the required stakeholders have the required infrastructure and personnel to make laws and regulate such high-end devices like MR and CT? And will there be a delay for us to get these products from international markets? The environment for manufacturing of such sophisticated diagnostic devices is not at present available in India. Though anecdotal evidences of MRI scanner indigenously being developed has been spoken of, you must understand that these sophisticated medical devices, the level of technology that is involved in these are not easily replicated. They are, in fact, I would say, I am not going overboard to say that they are about 2 or 3 steps notches probably lower than the defense technology. That is the level of sophistication that imaging technology and other medical devices have achieved. So, though a regulatory body is good, and the overarching emphasis on the government to make private players, indigenous players come into the market is good, the possibility of such thing happening in the near term is quite bleak. Thank you.
I would like to now call upon Chartered Accountant Mr. Manivannan to put in the effects of costing and cost into this equation.
In the long run, having your own regulatory framework which encourages manufacturers to create a common testing facility will help you to bring down the cost in long term, and that is good for us because 80 to 85% of the medical devices market is import driven. We are paying a large amount of it towards, a fairly good amount of it towards currency fluctuation. From 50 rupees to 60 rupees to 70 rupees, I don't think it is going to come down. So if we can look at local manufacturing hubs to be created, I don't know, it is not going to happen now immediately, but it's a dream which has to happen very shortly. So the cost has to be brought down, because if you are going to artificially impose ceilings, many of the foreign companies wouldn't like to bring their product here, not because they are not making money, because they want to also test your strength. That's what happened, because I was privy to a conversation of a medical device manufacturer who said many of the IPRs have been passed on, but the work was done in India and it comes back at a very higher cost. So I hope somewhere down the line the regulatory framework should create an environment for manufacturers to set up the base in India. I'm only worried about one thing. Presently, the trade margin capping is not being reasonable. It has to be more rational, and definitely it's a tug of war is going on. As part of this devices regulation, if this also can be taken up, we need to have large volume also. And the answer to one question is about the initial expenses on the testing and fees and all that. As you have more manufacturers coming in and more equipments getting manufactured, the biomedical equipment market is expanding. The volume at some point of time will bring down the per unit cost. That's my guess. But otherwise, we are still not clear how it is going to work on the costing. But probably we can talk about one more thing. The unregulated market definitely imposed in tier 3 and tier 2, where I was handling some lab diagnostic equipment. We were competing with imported equipment and good equipment with local lab fellows. We were not having that kind of a proper equipment. If this regulation can put an end to this, there will be at least a cost equilibrium being achieved with regard to the clinical outcome. So at least I can compete on level playing grounds. And then there is one thing which has happened post GST. It has also been pointed out by the Indian medical devices manufacturers meeting recently about 2 weeks ago. This is not directly related to the devices regulation, but as part of this also should be looked at that they have raised. By the imports have become cheaper by 11%, and the domestic manufacturers got a hit now. So we are now discouraging many of the domestic manufacturers. It's difficult for them to compete. So that's another problem. Of course, if the quality framework is stabilized, if I'm able to push more Indian manufacturers to achieve better quality, doctors' preferences will also shift from imported equipment to the local manufacturing equipment, because the famous example is in one of the Harvard Business Review's research studies on reverse innovation. China forced GE to come up with a very good, cheaper alternative in CT scan for the Chinese market, which also incidentally came up because of the compulsion to manufacture or to conform to certain standards and price regulation. I do not know whether that is going to happen in India. So finally, if this kind of a device regulations have to be really brought in, if you want to achieve a balance between import and the encouraging the multinational companies to set up the shop here. The multinational companies, I met the director of Siemens. He says we are all ready to come in, but there is no environment there. Talent is one thing which we need to retain at high expense, and then there are so many other regulatory issues which we are not able to sort out. So there has to be a single window clearance, low GST or no GST, and we have to give income tax benefit to the device manufacturing units at least for 6 to 7 years, because in the initial 3-4 years when you set up a unit, anyway you are not making profit. So the benefit of income tax not being there for the first 3 to 4 years does not appeal to me. So these kind of fine tuning has to happen along with the regulatory framework. Otherwise, the regulatory framework should not impose an unnecessary cost on the medical device market. That's what I could find out. The one thing is, if we could indigenize the quality parameters, we can discourage some of the multinational companies taking our market for granted. The famous one, I don't want to name the company, how many patients have been fighting. The cost in terms of lack of regulatory framework is not on the hospital. When I say cost, it is on the entire society. if the hip replacement is not done properly, look at number of visits he has gone. And imagine if this comes under a value based care and it will be taken as a service deficiency, because he opened up a chapter saying that service deficiency could also include the product liability, and product liability is not connected to the patient. So if I am installed with a hip replacement, I am only going behind the hospital. So what is the kind of cost that you are talking about? So there are several questions unanswered. To be very frank with you, I still don't know how the cost implications are going to be. The market has to stabilize, and then we need to bring in more people. The regulations have to encourage more people from abroad, not necessarily the Indian manufacturers, to set up the shop in India, so that as it happens in many of the motor vehicles and car manufacturing, or you take this mobile and you take so many other industries, even defense production is coming into India in a big way. If defense production can be brought and localized with proper regulatory framework and defense conditions and all that, why not medical devices? And that will bring my major cost. If this can contribute to cutting down my import cost, the currency fluctuation cost, then we are shaving off at least 15-20% of the cost of purchase. This is where I am looking at it. Thank you.
When a regulation comes in, whether it's good or bad, there is always a resistance to change. And I would like to call upon my good friend Dr. Parag to talk about the good, the bad and the ugly of how this is going to affect the health industry.
The National Health Policy has taken it upon itself to improve quality, lower healthcare delivery cost. So much so that now hysterectomies are being peddled at 9,500 rupees in Mumbai, where the average take home of a gynecologist for hysterectomy is 35,000. Maybe my finance head and my chartered accountant geniuses can help me out and understand how I'm expected to pay 9,500 में से 35,000 में कैसे दूंगा. At the same time, let's understand that there was an exercise done on costing by AHPI in Bangalore hospitals, which clearly showed that the cost of running a government single bed per day government hospital is 19,000 rupees, including electricity, non-air conditioned ward. And then Ayushman Bharat wants to pay some piddly amount of some XYZ paltry hundreds of rupees. So anyway, I'm known to be a critic of Ayushman Bharat, so please excuse me, my apologies, I don't mean ill. I am a BJP supporter, and Mr. Modi, I've had the privilege of meeting him when he was Chief Minister. He's a very nice man. What is being questioned here also in the National Health Policy is the role of payer rather than provider. So who is going to be the payer? And the government is going to be the payer. Raising public expenditure to 2.5% GDP, utopian, but if it happens and if we go down the NHS way, then we are doomed for disaster, which is what our Ayushman is trying to do. And why am I linking Ayushman with the drug as, with the device as drug? I'll come to that. But essentially, the dream is good. We are looking at improved outcomes, better utilization of the money that we are spending, okay? Probably the first thing we need to do is shut down all the government hospitals, and then we might get somewhere. Devices drug, huge positive effects on the health industry. I think my co-panelists have brought this out very, very well. Cheaper cost will be known, make in India over time. I'm sure that when Trump has to have his MRI for his stroke, after 10 years, he'll be doing it in a make in India MRI machine in Washington, D.C., which is perfect. This is what we want. We want benefits and risks to be defined. Clinical trials will be carried out, as Sir rightly pointed out, as per the regulatory requirements. Ayushman is an opportunity for this, because if we get cheaper devices and we're able to set up a one MRI and one CT machine in at every panchayat level, or maybe at a taluka level, I think that's huge. I think that's a huge opportunity. And then corporate hospitals might be able to sit pretty and say, okay, we don't want Ayushman. Okay. So this is all the positives, and there is huge scope for this, and I welcome the step essentially in terms of it going under the drugs as a point. Point number on the negative side, there are a few negatives, like there always are. One, we'll be deprived of new technology. I think, like we've seen some of the higher level stents going away, and I've got doctors who now go to Colombo to do plasties, because the stents are available there and they're not available in India. So I think this is one thing. We'll be deprived of newer technology. The advances will not come to us. Everything will get impacted in terms of availability, because there will be a huge process, and the moment there is one complaint, and believe me, there are enough deterrents to our healthcare industry, one single complaint against a device, it will have to go back to the drawing board, it will have to go back to clinical trials. Okay, I totally agree with Dr. Sudhin when he said that the cuts that are available today on MRIs and CTs, for example, it's truly of the level where you are able to pinpoint I don't know, 0.1 millimeter kind of a focus on an MRI and treat that using today's linear accelerators and cyberknives, etc. So I mean your all these various tools that we have. So I don't know whether we are going to get there. We should, we will, I'm sure, but it's going to take some time. I think it's a question of time, and I don't think it's going to take so much time. A couple of decades we should be there. What's more, so the ugly part which I've not put in a slide, because you don't put ugly things in writing, you just say the ugly things up front. I think the day and age will come when if the union ministers and the chief ministers are willing to get their MRIs done in an Indian machine, make in India, which is a 0.2 or a 0.4 Tesla machine, I think that's the day when we should accept these machines for the general masses. I think when the Prime Minister decides to go in an ambassador which is bulletproofed by Calcutta, in Calcutta or Kolkata as it's now called, that's when we'll accept the fact that ambassador, make in India, drug devices, when the President of India gets his stenting done in India, at Safdarjung Hospital, not at All India Institute of Medical Sciences, using an Indian stent under an Indian CT machine with a cardiologist who's purely Indian trained and does not have a Beth Israel or a Mass General kind of a fellowship. I think that's the day when we'll all as human beings simply accept that India is here to reflect. I'm sorry, Mr. Moderator, I'm probably overstepping my brief, but I think that when you talk about devices to be accepted as drugs, there should be Ayushman Bharat for everybody. The day our babus get out of the comfort of CGHS, because they use CGHS to go to better hospitals, but they don't go to the government hospitals. You go to the government hospitals, get an MRI under a 0.2 Tesla MRI for whom CMC is not given. It's not just about the device as a drug. It's also about the maintenance of the device. The drug is something which is taken one time and forgotten. There is an effect, there's a half-life, it moves away. Devices need continuous maintenance, devices need multiple things. If those are also to be defined under the ambit of this, then I think it makes a lot of sense. Just like storage conditions are defined for drug, packaging conditions are defined. Similarly, you'll have to define working conditions. You'll have to define the fact that you, like at Nair Hospital, which is right opposite my hospital, we did have an episode, it was all over Mumbai Mirror and Times of India, where the extinguisher got sucked into the MRI and 2 people lost their lives. I think the moment you're able to define the paraphernalia, wherein the fire department also puts up an Indian standard, which is good. I love India, that's why I stayed back in my country. The moment the fire department also puts up a standard that aluminum extinguishers will only be used in MRI areas, and that's when we'll give the fire NOC, I think that's when we will accept this as positive. As of now, I would rate it as 2 positives and 1 negative. Thank you very much.
Sanjeev Kumar will finally summarize the whole thing and give us the way forwards.
India is a very funny country. Damn if you do and damn if you don't. So even if you take 2 steps forward, there is plenty of, because the country is so diverse that you have quaternary care hospitals and you have PHCs and you just cannot compare. So one shoe will never fit all. And then this whole atmosphere of jugaad which we have built over the years in India, and we accepted the fact that it all is possible, is also we have to come out of this whole episode which we have created over the years. I just wanted to bring few points that there is a very large understanding that government doesn't do anything, and I think that's one of the key points which we need to come out of it. Because CDSCO also has a drug safety council, and they have done a fantastic work. Unfortunately, they had to do it very silently. They have gone ahead, they have created, just like an election commission, they have created a cell where they have raided 40,000 pharmaceutical companies, and they have collected samples. These samples were couriered to only 3 labs in the country. And it was almost like an election commission workflow. When the samples were taken, they were guarded. The dates were defined. It was disclosed on the day when these samples were to be taken. The courier companies were only 11 in the whole country which were identified, and the protocols were written. And they have really, at least the intent was shown, and at least with this government the intent is slightly higher towards the public. This Medical Device Regulation Act has been lying on table, and the previous governments, because of policy paralysis, it's been there for 12 years. And it is a welcome move that at least somebody is acting, and somebody is acting for somebody's benefit. And definitely there is a lot of work which needs to be done. If I take back the example of health technology assessment, they keep talking about three things, which is very important. One is critical appraisal, which is important from all perspectives. There are positive, there are negative. They also talk about horizon scanning, because they needs to have a taluk level person and a quaternary care person also to be evaluated. Plus, they also talk about innovation, which is extremely important. And during this process, what has happened is, as rightly was quoted by many of the panelists, there are a lot of indigenization which has happened. IIT Chennai has become a fantastic hub for biomedical equipment innovation and practices. Sri Chitra, in our own state, though many of us would not know, they have produced 14 new medical devices and they're all up for testing. We only know about Sri Chitra valve. And unfortunately, we don't use Sri Chitra valves, though it is indigenized. And if we use, we only use for poor patients because we don't want to take risk. We did that study within our hospital, and we realized that all the Sri Chitra valves, the quality outcomes at the 7-year survival was fantastic. So it is as comparable as St. Jude's. But unfortunately, though we say we are Indian, we are proud Indian, but when we have to actually use it, we are still very, very doubtful. So there are few companies who have already taken this indigenization example. Unfortunately, our training and the culture of safety isn't there. GE is a good company, multinational company. They said that let's talk about Make in India. So they in Chennai they made a baby warmer which was low cost. Baby warmer which is close to 3.5 to 4 lakhs. They made it at 30,000 rupees and they gave it to CMC Vellore to test it, and then they gave it to another hospital within Tamil Nadu, and I will not like to name it, and they said that please test it and say that how does it work. And they when the GE people went back after 3 months, they realized, and when they asked for an outcome, they said, which baby warmer are you talking about? Why we had given, it was there in nursery and it was there in NICU, and they said that we would like to see it. When they went to see, all blankets were being warmed under baby warmer. And we do need indigenization, but unfortunately our education is so poor, our literacy is so poor, our indigenization, the culture of safety is so pathetic that we are unable to bring this in practice. So whatever has been, though Chandrababu Naidu lost this election for various reasons, I think he has developed, and one of the faculty had mentioned about medical devices park. And just like a techno park, which is there in Trivandrum, which is there in Cochin, and which is there in many other, he has gone ahead and has developed a medical device park, and extreme degree of innovation was taking place until, unfortunately, again, political issues, it has all been closed down in this. There is a good example which everybody takes, and you might be already knowing it, when this film actress Sridevi's mother was taken for, she was having a brain tumor, she was taken to one of the best hospitals. That was Sloan Kettering Hospital in US. So the best cancer hospital. She was being treated by Dr. Jefferson, the best neuro-oncologist. When she was wheeled in, the images were all done. When she was wheeled into the theater, Dr. Jefferson started operating, and then he found that there is no cancer on the right brain where he was operating. He got the images done, he got the images back into the OR, and then he realized it was all in left. My point is, you can go wrong in best of the hospital with best of the neuro-oncologist and best of the physicians. You can go wrong. And always keep quoting that in India you do go wrong may not be the right example. So what has been brought out as an MDR rule 2017 with few amendments, it's up for public. I think I encourage all of you to also mention or to participate. It's up for public opinion. It has been made extremely simple. Most of the drugs, there is risk stratification which has happened. There is online submission which was already mentioned. There is the standard adherence of 13485 is happening. There is recall facility. there was no value which was given to clinical trials for devices, which is all with respect to pharmaceuticals, which was not there. There is a timeline which has been already put in by the government, so they are challenging themselves. So it is all positive. I think we should take this as a positive step. Point well taken, Dr. Parag, that ambassador cars and but Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee did have his knee replacement with Dr. Ranawat here. So we would definitely we would definitely like to encourage all our politicians to adhere to what they say. But overall, I think it's a fantastic move. Devices do need to come into this perspective. The regulations, even the clinicians' perspective is important of having the PET, CT, MR, and we have seen it with the PCPNDT Act. That when the regulations come in, there is a lot of value which is added, which is there within the practice, which is also very valuable. So it is a very valuable move, and I'll leave up with the moderator to ultimately end the confusion.
Just before we close, I would like to ask the audience if they would like to ask anybody any particular question.
The name is Drug and Medical Devices. Why should it come under the Drug Act or whatever it is? There are bodies, governing bodies for standardization of the MRI, CT and all radiation. It's excellently done in India. Why should it be introduced into this? Is it a device used in the body? It's not a device. So I don't understand the logic of bringing that into this. Then an ambulance also should be there. Then the driver also should be there.
As a definition, they have taken wherever there is diagnostic and therapeutic advance. So PET CT is diagnostic and it could be therapeutic as well.
Yeah.
Both so they have gone with the basic definition. So if ambulance also adds to therapy, maybe they will start taking that.
Definitely. It's a therapy.
I think the larger question here is what is being asked is that you have these Maruti Omnis running around as ambulances without defibrillators. In India, we are the only country probably that has a concept of a non-cardiac ambulance, which is more like a patient transport vehicle. So I think there needs to be over time a standard on minimum standard on ambulances, which must come into play over time. I think that's more relevant and more life-saving than this. This is at least in some way regulated right now.
All the MRIs will have the same pricing, all the CT will be having the same pricing afterwards. Is it so? Could be. Because all the stents are being priced like that. Price cap is put on so many other drugs and other devices. So it should also come.
CDSCO is on the way to recruit around 300 to 600 biomedical engineers, etc. And it takes time. They have to define standards for each equipment slowly. On fine morning, you cannot have all standards together. So it is taking time, and slowly this will be having a different aspect, different view also.
In last 75 years now, India could not bring in standard in the drug manufacturing. Then how can they bring standard in all these devices as the equipments and major equipments?
It's a positive, it takes time. Again, for
it will take time. By the time we will be much under 50 years behind our other Western countries.
Again, pricing. Again, slowly can also DPC also may come in some cases where government finds that a lot of margins are given for the middlemen. In that case, normally they come into DPC in the future also. Margin gapping.
I think I have a question for the panelists, if I may step on Dr. Alexander's side for a minute. On the one hand, we are trying to bring in indigenization and improvements within our system, which is really commendable. I think our nation has lagged behind on multiple fronts. On the other hand, if you look at the additional costs that you are talking about, somewhere these costs have to be recovered by companies who are investing. There has to be what we call a decent ROI or decent ROC, which has to be sort of spoken about. Now, if bulk of the hospitals over time are going to move over to a kind of an Ayushman Bharat kind of a rate, whether we Bombay participated in FICCI or no, immaterial. If we're going to move over to an Ayushman Bharat kind of a rate, or a rate between Ayushman Bharat and current CGHS or even CGHS rates en masse, and let's face it, today Mr. Modi does have a full majority. He can just put this through as an ordinance where every hospital suddenly becomes nationalized. We may all protest till hell and high heaven come together, but at the end of the day, he can do it. My question is one, why does the amount of money put into all of these new things not get reflected into the costing of healthcare providers when we have to provide healthcare? Why is it only that monies are being levied but not being passed on as benefit to the people who are actually spending it? Like I buy an MRI, which is a 3 Tesla MRI, and maybe it goes through the protocol, but why am I not able to charge that premium over somebody who has a lower MRI or who has an international, I don't know. So that cost has to be passed on, sir.
Yeah, as of now, the way the Ayushman Bharat rates are fixed, you will all, smile at it. First, he said at 20% lesser than CGHS rate. All of us know how when CGHS was fixed, when as bond CGHS rates are fixed. That is a kind of, we have not been revised. There is no medical price index. So when we did a survey of 12 to 15 hospital, top only 10-15 procedures, hardly we are able to recover not more than 60% of the treatment cost. So government knows this very clearly, and we have, not only FICCI, IMA has come there, and most of the people have come there. See, we cannot compromise quality of treatment, and the medical devices play an important role today, and their cost also has to be, the manufacturers have to recover it, so the volume has to go up. Which means if you really want to give incentive to the medical devices manufacturers, you have to create an ecosystem where they find it cost effective to manufacture in India, and then supply to us at a reasonable price. But the Ayushman Bharat prices at this level definitely not possible to.
So just one question.
There is a problem with, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Sir, to Manivandan sir. Sir, I have personally I have seen the FICCI report. My question to you, sir, is they have done a good study, but this, as far as my understanding goes, the FICCI report has never been tabled in the Parliament. Do you think the Parliament will discuss on this, or at least adopt the FICCI report, or at least something scientific, more scientific, or at least close to scientific as the FICCI report?
Yeah, when we met Dr. Vivek Pal, was a member of this, I think, Health Commission. He said that he mentioned that they have taken input from FICCI's report, but I don't see in the data template which they have given all to the private hospital anywhere close to that. Number one. Number two, the other question is, unfortunately, FICCI has done a report with Manivandan, not with Deloitte or PwC, so it has never seen the Parliament. I'll be very blunt on this, because most of the, many of you will be from Deloitte or whatever, those people are good in everything, but they may not be so good in healthcare. Healthcare needs a different training and exposure. So Mr. Rajiv, who is the Vice Chairman reporting to Mr. Modi, we met him, we presented the report. They are aware of the fact that Ayushman Bharat schemes are very low, and they are aware of the fact that packages need to be reworked, but we don't know how it is going to be taken up.
Dr. Sanjeev, you wanted to say something?
Unfortunately, government has a mechanism of this tendering for pricing. So they have to take it as L1. Now, and they ask all hospitals, either it is 5-bedded hospital or 3,000-bed hospital, to tender. Now, even if they don't do kidney transplant, they can tender. And government has no way to correct this. And they have realized this mistake. So what has happened with ECHS and CGHS, one of the 5-bedded hospitals said kidney transplant, they'll do it 4,000 rupees. And government published that price. And government knows this is a huge mistake, but this is unfortunate because they are unable to correct the whole mechanism. So the point is that they are realizing that there is a methodology issue within them, and they are also realizing that it won't be very viable if 70% of things are done by private. It's not going to be viable. There has to be a continuous dialogue, and it's going to take its own time.
I think just to speak on what we just spoke about, government not knowing left hand, not knowing what the right hand do it. I think some of this dichotomy also stems from the fact that while this policy is all driven by the center, health still remains a state subject. So while we are the ones who are spending at our state capitals, we are certainly thrust upon with some laws which may not appeal to a particular state, but we don't have the liberty of just walking out on those laws. So that's the other problem.
You know how the medical imaging prices were fixed in the previous tendering. One of the largest medical lab chain, I don't want to, it's a Delhi based, the CEO asked the pricing to be tendered and they quoted. They have done the copy paste of the 3 years before whatever they have done, and they have quoted such low prices, every other lab chain or diagnostic chain found it very difficult to match, and that's how this got translated into that. There was a discussion among the FICCI private hospital committee members, and this was one of the issues, and nobody in the government in their wisdom thought that how could one guy could be so low when all the others have quoted differently. I think now there is a realization, at least they listened to us, we were able to talk to them, we went up to Niti Aayog, we told them it's only 60% of your, this thing is only our reimbursement. So probably as he's mentioned, it's going to be a long drawn exercise.
What about the devices, whichever is being installed? Will it be retrospective or only the new sales will be affected by this law?
And only new sales are regulated, new sales only from the date. From 1st of, example from 1st of January, for those items, we'll have to have all controls from 1st of that way only.
End this by throwing one googly at the panel. We in India have a peculiar this. We do what is called use single-use devices multiple. Okay, you understand what I mean. How will it affect? How will this affect that situation? I'm sure it will be very difficult to answer, but I think it's a food for thought. So I'd like to end by saying a big thank you to everybody, especially the audience, for being such patient listening and such an interactive session. A very, very important topic, very poorly understood topic, but I think it has come out quite well. My fellow participants, a big thank you for coming from such great distances and making us aware about this important act coming our way. Knowledge, as we say, is an anticipatory preparation. All I have to say is that if you have understood what I said today, GST is very simple to understand. I'd like to thank BMH and the team led by Alexa and Gracie for selecting this topic, and which is very, very poorly understood, but more importantly, putting such a knowledgeable team together to impart such vital information. Thank you very much for this patient listening.
Thank you, sir.
And foremost, I would like to thank our chairman, Dr. K.G. Alexander, for his boundless support and encouragement to this program and make it a fruitful one. On behalf of the organizing committee and all of you, I extend a big thanks to him. Yesterday, Sri Thotathil Ravindran, Worshipful Mayor, Corporation of Calicut, inaugurated this conference. On behalf of all of us, the BMH family, and on my personal behalf, I extend our sincere gratitude for his august presence and inspiring address. During the last 24 hours, we had the opportunity to see several eminent personalities delivering talks to various specialties which have enriched our knowledge. We have been greatly honored by the gracious presence and also immensely benefited by their valuable teachings. Mr. Vishal Bali, Dr. Giridhar Gyani, Mr. Jayan Murthy, Dr. Narayan Pense, Mrs. Maladi Jaswal, Mr. Manivannan, Dr. Parak Rindani, Dr. S. Sanjeev Singh, Dr. Abraham Aman, Mrs. Gracie Madai, and Mr. Saji Matthew.
On behalf of the BMH family, I express our sincere sense of appreciation for their excellent presentation. The panel discussion led by Dr. Abraham Aman and the panelists Dr. Sanjeev Singh, Dr. Sadish Kumar, Dr. Parag Brandani, Mr. Manivannan, Advocate Shyam Batman, Mr. Saji Matthew, Dr. Sudinas did a wonderful job, and the discussions were really thought-provoking. Thank you all for your advice and participation. I also wish to express my gratitude to our CEO, Mrs. Gracie Mathai, whose directions and guidance during every step of the way ensured that this function becomes a grand success. Expressing our gratitude to Mrs. Anita Alexander, Executive Director, Directors of this hospital, Dr. Vineet Abraham, Dr. Anju Miriam Alex, Mr. Saji Matthew, Lieutenant Colonel Sunny Thomas, Dr. Roy K. George, Mr. Suresh Kumar Tambi, Mr. Salil Shankar for providing all support and encouragement. The success of every program depends on its participants. I convey my sincere thanks to all distinguished delegates who have come from distant places, especially to attend this conference. And even such a heal does not happen overnight. The wheel started rolling weeks ago. It required intensive planning and an eagle's eye for details. We have been fortunate enough to be backed by a team of very motivated and dedicated colleagues led by Mrs. Gracie Mathai, Saji Matthew, Lieutenant Colonel Sunny Thomas, Vijay Johnson, Conference Coordinator, Jiju KK, Organizing Secretary, Mr. Ajay Alexander, Mr. Santosh Balakrishnan, Mr. Kamal K, and Mrs. Smita Pillai, whose hard work and single-minded approach made this event the most memorable one in the history of BMH. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them a big round of applause. Deviating from the earlier editions, this year we arranged a variety entertainment program performed by our hospital staff and students under the able guidance of Mrs. Elizabeth Bobby, Assistant Professor, College of Nursing. Please give them a big hand. I express my sincere thanks to Dr. Abhay Mani Martin, Dr. Bijoy Johnson and Mr. Saji Matthew for evaluating the paper presentation competitions, which was also a first time. I also express our sincere gratitude to our knowledge partner, RAFA and ASPI for their advice and guidance. I extend my thanks to Mrs. Beckman Coulter, Reliant Diagnostics, Olive Healthcare and Surgicals, Arjo Handley, Praxis Healthcare, BioMaria India Private Limited and other co-sponsors for their close cooperation and support in organizing this event. Also extending our sincere thanks to Father M.H. Anthony, Director Navajyotis Renewal Center for providing accommodation to the student delegates. I extend my thanks to the print and electronic media for their presence and providing excellent coverage of the conference. I would also like to take this opportunity to place on record our heartfelt thanks to all team members of various departments, including supply chain, marketing, finance, customer relations, facilities, engineering support, housekeeping, security, food and beverages for their more than perfect logistic support. I extend my special thanks to the facilities team, Mr. Prashant, Mr. Arjun, Mr. Ajesh, for their excellent coordination of audio visuals and other arrangements in this auditorium. Dear friends, we have with us two extremely smart ladies who coordinated all the programs and schedules in the auditorium with grace and poise, Dr. Shaka Puthuran and Ms. Reti Mariam John. A special thanks to both of you. Lastly, it would be a good idea for the participants, especially those who have come from outside Kerala, to visit and enjoy the scenic beauty of God's own country. Mr. Jiddu Krishnamurthy, an eminent philosopher and writer, once said, "There is no end to education. It is not that you read a book, pass an examination, and finish with education. The whole of life, from the moment you are born to the moment you die, is a process of learning." So, dear participants, I request you to please continue this journey of education, enhance your knowledge, flourish in the field wherever you are, and share your wisdom with others. Once again, I thank you all for your interest shown and participation in this conference and making it one of the most popular healthcare management conferences of this country.